Okay, sorry about that. We're hopefully back in business. Start video. This is really messed up. Okay. Okay, like I said, we're ready to rock and roll here. Let me just get this taken care of. That's all on mute. Let's close that. Make this small. I'm just talking to myself, or feel free to talk amongst yourselves right now. I just got a little technical issue here.
My great aunt.
What's the name? Perek bat Rachalea ve'Avram Lipa. And name? Nishmat Miriam bat. Father for Ashkenazim. Avram Laser and okay, Shalom, whoever the relative is, and of course for Victor Chai Avram ben Meir Tzir Rachalea and Ari Zalman as well. Ari Yechiel ben Ruvain. No. Okay. No, it's okay. Hashem knows. No. No. Yeah. Yes, I've had people ask me, can you daven for someone who's not Jewish or their names? Of course you can. Absolutely. Daven for anybody. You can daven for Hamas that they should be destroyed. It's also good daven. Okay. We are dealing with, I'm just going to reread the Mishnah.
I'm Jewish guys and my son, one of my sons, I have my son's lots in one.
Yes.
So one of them was getting updates and on Friday morning, a few of the women said we want to do Alpha Challah, please send the names. So one of them is even like in Kulsar, she lives in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like Mamash, non-Jewish.
Wow.
So they, whatever, they don't know, right?
Of course.
So they send their.
That's
Well,
sweet.
what I've been
Yeah.
listening to a lot of the interviews of people that survived.
Yes.
7, and a few of them are not Jewish. I mean, they say
Right.
they came over from
No.
Scotland.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The Thai workers and there's somebody else the other day was from Thailand, it was different countries. Like it's just been unbelievable. And we're the bad guys. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to reread the Mishnah. We're in Perek Aleph. We are doing Mishnah Vav. I'm just going to reread it, and I'll tell you what we're going to do today. Yoshua ben Prachi v'nita Beli kiblu mehem. Yoshua ben Prachi omer, aseh lecha rav, you should make for yourself a rav, uknei lecha chaver, and you should acquire for yourself a friend, v'avedan kol adam l'kav zechut, and you should also judge people favorably. Now, I mentioned last week that all three of those statements, which you really just translated only last time, really each one is a sheer unto itself. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to probably only concentrate on the first two parts. Aseh lecha rav and uknei lecha chaver. Hopefully I get through both of them. When I finish those two, I'm going to dedicate a specific shir to the third one. A number of years ago, some of you were there, I gave, before COVID, for a few years in a row, I gave, during the winter, I gave a series of shiurim on Motzei Shabbat by Karina Maltz and Michael Maltz's place. One of them was on Dan L'Kav Zechut. And I found my notes and stuff, and I really would like not to repeat it word for word, but because whatever, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I want to go through that a little bit more because I think all three of these topics are critically important. We'll also see how they relate, but it's also, I think, the time period we're in right now, and then they say called the day after, when things go back to a different way, I'm not going to say normal, that we're going to need to make sure we take that a little bit more to heart than we have maybe in the past. So with that introduction, I mentioned to you in passing last week near the end that Yoshua ben Prachia was famous for something besides the fact that he was a Tana and he was the time period of the Mishne, of course, that he had a person who learned in his yeshiva that ended up causing there to be about 2 billion Christians in the world right now. His name was Jesus, also known in the Gemara as Yeshu. He's called Yeshu because Yud Shin Vav stands for Yemach Shemo V'Zichro. Yeah, that's why he's called Yeshu. Yes. Yeah. No, it's not because of Yeshua. It's not, no. In Latin, if you've ever seen any churches, you'll see, or outside of church, you'll see It's I say Rashi Tevot, the abbreviation INRI, INRI. It's Latin for Jesus, the King of the Jews. So to say, because it was Jewish, it was a Jewish boy that went off the derech, big way.
There, so one of the stories
Yeah.
is that there was a big rob.
Yes.
He wanted.
This is the story.
Okay.
The story I'm going to give you now for the Gemara. It's Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachia. What's that?
Right.
He says, I say, look how wrong. That's the first.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I'm going to tell you the story to put everything in context. You don't use that word anymore. Okay.
Oh.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I'm going to read you. Originally, I was going to print it. I said, hey, you'll deal. Okay, Gemara in Masechet Sotah. Now, just as an aside, if you have a Gemara that's older than, let's say, pre-Art Scroll days, so go back into before 1980s. You have an older Gemara, you open up a Masechta Sanhedrin, for example, and you'll find, especially towards the end, you'll have let's say the page is this big, right? So you have words only about that much, and it's a bunch of white space at the bottom, because they historically had censored a lot of the Gemaras way before that, taking out any reference to Jesus, taking out other references that were found. Who censored it? Not us. Not us. It was censored by the governments that we were under, the Polish government or whoever. Yeah. Now there's a small booklet. I actually have a copy from the early 1900s. It's already been reprinted, but I have this one called Chesronot Hashas, things that are missing from the Talmud. They're not missing, they were taken out. A lot of stuff that was taken out mostly had to do with Jesus, because the censors felt that was mostly ridiculing him and stories that would not reflect well on the church. So those are missing. Now, since the days of Art School and a little before, they were put back in. All the Gemaras that are printed nowadays, the newer Gemaras, anything that Oz V'Hadar and all those ones you see, all have it in there now. Interestingly enough, that means also that when the Daf Yomi cycles were learning early on, they were not learning those Gemaras. Now you would be learning those Gemaras, in theory, depending on who's teaching it, which version of the Gemara you have in front of you. But it's called Chesronot Hashas because things that were missing, that's a nice way of saying they were removed by censors. So this is one of those stories that was missing. This is Gemara in Sotah. It says as follows. I'm going to read it to you. It's in Aramaic, and I'll translate. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachia was traveling with his entourage, with a bunch of his students, among whom was Yeshu. We used to call him cheese and crackers, all the different titles, whatever you want to call him. Kiata ikla lahu lishbiza. At one point they were traveling. They came to a particular inn. Kam kamayu bika shapir. They gave all this. They saw Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachia coming, and they gave him tremendous kavod as he came to the inn. Avdila tuva. Yati v'kamishtabech. So they kept giving more praise, and they gave him all kinds of come on, you could have maybe use the sauna for free, whatever it was. So Jesus steps up and says, I actually I put the psik in one place. Yati v'kamishtabech. So Jesus gets up and says, wow, kama na'a asanyazo. How pretty is this innkeeper lady? Like the lady who's checking us in, like, whoa, she's really cute. Amar le Yeshu hanotzri. Wait a second. Sorry, I'm reading this wrong again. Hold on one second. No. Okay, I insinuated something before. Okay, let's try this again. So first, Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachia said about the place. What an amazing inn. It's a beautiful place. Amar le Yeshu hanotzri. So Yeshu the Notzri said, Rabbi, einet hutot. Her eyes are slanted. And I was like, okay, you got a nice place, but she's not that pretty. It's the opposite. She's not that cute. Amar le Russia. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachia said, you are Russia. But that's what you're involved in checking out the women? So he pushed him back 400 whatever, and he put him into Chera. So what happened was Yeshu felt bad. I mean, his Rebbe just pushed him out the door, kicked him to the curb. So he kept trying to come back, and Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachia says, nothing do it. Yom Echad, one day, Havikari Kriyat Shema. One day, Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachia was standing saying Shema. Ata lakame. So again, Yeshu comes to him, And at that point, Rav Shua ben Prachia said to himself, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm going to take him back in. So he motioned him with his hand because he was middle saying Shema. He went like this to him. So Yeshu thought he was being pushed away yet again. So what did he do? He took a brick, he stood it up, and he started to worship it as if it were an idol. Amarle chazor becha. So the Reb Shimon Prachis saw that. He says, "Do tshuva, come back." Amarle. So Yeshu said, "Kach mekublani mimcha. I've learned from you. Wait a second. Kol achotei machtiat harabim." And the classic person is Yeravim ben Nevat. Whoever sins and causes the people to sin, and speaking lo biadola so tshuva. He can't do tshuva. Meaning, you can tell me to do tshuva. I'm lost. I'm done. Damar said earlier, Yeshu notzi kishet vehisit veidiach vechtiat Yisrael. The Gemara says that Yeshu did some sorcery and he caused people to sin, the Jewish people to sin. And the Gemara goes on and talks about it, and it says that he went off the derech and he stayed off the derech as a result of this story. The Gemara ends with a comment. I forgot if it was Rabbi Yoshua, I forgot it was Rabbi Yochanan, that this is the classic example of when you're dealing with people. It's what's called yamin mekarevet smol docha. Your right hand should pull the person closer and your left hand should push them away, which means you have to balance out how you deal with people. Can I use you as an example for a second, Mark? Okay. No, please. Thank you. You're offering him up as a korban. So someone pointed, you have to make sure we get his raise. We have to be on the computer here so he can be seen. Okay, because now look at this, look at that. You have like I told people, I was told I have a face for radio. Okay, so what happens when you push away someone with your right hand and pull them to your left? You're turning them around, right? So what you're doing is, thank you very much. You did a very good job. Thank you. Yes, he'll be here Tuesdays and Thursdays. Unbelievable. You stand, yeah, unfortunately, you're here all week. So it's an expression that on one hand means be careful what you say to people. One phrase can just push someone off the deep end and say, you know, that's Judaism. I don't want nothing to do with it. On the other hand, you can't just say, do what you want. So it has to be a balance. But at the same time, in the allegorical sense, it means to help turn that person around. Okay, you did a very good job. I'm really impressed. Okay, lots of practice? Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to spend a few minutes now talking about this topic of Aseh L'Charav. And some of my own comments and some comments from classic commentators. General question, it's rhetorical, I'll answer. How do you like that? God, you shouldn't have done that with coffee in your mouth, right?
My husband says that to me.
Does he really?
Very different. He's like rhetorical.
Why does someone need to have a Rav? Why have one? First of all, why is it Aseh L'Charav? It says we have two verbs here. Aseh L'Charav, make for yourself a Rav, and Knei L'Chaver, acquire. So we're going to come to that in a little bit. Not yet. We'll come to that soon, but different opinions. Actually, the Meiri has two opinions that contradict each other, but that's okay. You can look at it from different perspectives. So why does a person need to have a Rav? I would ask you, why do you need to have a doctor? Why do you need to have an accountant? Why do you need to have any professional in your life? Because it's impossible for someone to know everything about a certain area, right? Even a doctor needs to have a doctor. A physical therapist needs to have a physical therapist. A therapist should have a therapist, right? Because and more than one. And a rabbi needs a rabbi as well. Like I mentioned briefly last week, with very, very few exceptions, every Rav has a Rav. Matter of fact, when I was my tryout, I've actually consulted with some shuls since over the last few years looking for a rabbi. And one of the questions I always tell them to ask is, ask your Rav who his posek is. And I'll say, like, what? Ask him who his posek is. Because if he says he can make all the decisions himself, he's not your Rav. Absolutely not. Because there's always gonna be questions, either it's too close to home and you can't answer it yourself, or it's areas of expertise you just don't have, right? And then when you find out who his posek is, he may be really good and fit the position, but when you find his posek is like, Mr. Machmir about everything, or Mr. Makel about everything, that also says about who he is. So you have to be careful when the Rav himself was choosing a Rav. You have to be very careful. I had until he passed away, Rav Gedalia Schwartz in Chicago, that's how was my Rav, and when I was living there especially. And when we moved, I had not yet said, okay, I really want to discuss certain things with a certain Rav. So I called him a couple of times, and like the third time, it had to do with more of a question that had to do with more of an Israel question. He said, "What are you asking me for?" He's a very humble man. I said, "Rabbi, I mean, like, I'm calling because I don't know the answer." He says, "Yeah, but that's an Israel question. Don't ask me." Now, what did that mean? He knew the answer 100%. I could have called him on Shelot, the Trumot and Masrot. He would have known it, no question. He says, asking Israel. And it could defer to the Rav here because there may be certain aspects that, that will color the answer to the question. So a Rav needs a Rav. Why does everyone also need a Rav? Because there are plenty of things you can learn in your life. You can learn about Shabbat and Basar Chalav and all, but things are going to come up. And you're going to have to ask questions. And you can, in certain cases, just look up the answer yourself, especially now with the more Google that you can check with Rabbeinu Moreno, Rabbeinu, the Rashka Bahag Google, and that's fine. I'll tell you a little trade secret. If I get a question on Hilchot Nida, if it's not a black and white question, then I will first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Nishmat website, which has a massive, amazing source of information, but not for the answer. I want to see the footnote. I want to see what the source is. Sometimes it's Rav Henkin, sometimes it's others. It's a posek, and I'll know where to go from there. Just to look up the answer, like okay, I said, go to the Nishma website and look for yourself. But there's ways that nowadays we have so many resources that are available, which is makes it a lot easier. Plus, it also opens up the ability for people to sometimes check for themselves. And become more educated. There are two types of people that I have found over the years. The person who asks everything and are you sure? Like, and I have people, unfortunately, I have two people in the last few years, I've had to say, look, he would leave me a 5-minute voice note for a simple question such as I put my milk spoon into my flesh, whatever soup. But it's a 5-minute voice note because he was super OCD. He would not only tell me the problem, he'd tell me what he thinks the answer was and why it might not be. And then we also thought that maybe something splattered from that pot onto some can that was sitting in his closet with the door locked, but it might have flown through the air and almost ad kedei kach. So you have to be right. And we've gone. So I finally said to him, Mr. So-and-so, here's the deal. If you send me a voice note that's longer than 59 seconds, I'm not going to listen to it. You have to cut it down. So he started sending me messages that were shorter, 2 minutes. I said, nope, I said I didn't listen to it. Try again. And I finally got him down to below 1 minute. So it's good. I mean, I don't mind questions that could be 25-minute long, but not when it is something that you want to start telling me all the reasons you think the answer should be this way, that you think it should be that way, then go figure it out. All right, go figure it out. I'm happy to discuss it with you, but get your act together. So we can't all know everything, right? Hilchot Shabbat, whatever the area might be. What I have found over the years also, it happened to me and it happened to me this week, is that I can go 25 years without a single question on a topic and I get it twice in a week. I had that with Shiloh Hakan, the sending away the motherboard. I had most of my entire rabbinic career without getting a question. Twice in a week I got it. And this past week, 2 people asked me the same Shiloh that I don't think I've had ever. So it's like I said, I can't believe you asked me that question. I said, why? What's wrong with asking the question? I said, someone just asked me the same thing. I said, I was able to answer you quickly because I had to spend the time of the first one. So that was cool. A kan and can are both correct, but it's a kan tzipor. Ki karei lecha kan tzipor b'derech choletz v'la'aretz. Yeah, I've heard it pronounced both ways, but kan is the way it's in the Torah itself. And there's a Masechta, it's just Mishne called Kinim, which is the plural. That's near the end of Tarot. The Kinim, with a kuf, not a kaf. Yeah, kaf is lice and kuf is the plural of kan, the nest. Okay, so we can't rely on ourselves. How comfortable would you be to go to a doctor who, as they say, treats himself or herself? Like if it's a lawyer who has a fool for a client, right? If he represents himself or herself. So it's no different when it comes to Judaism. What I have found in over the years also is that people in certain areas of halacha decided that they're going to become their own posek, and then with everything else, they're willing to ask, where does it make the difference? I told you the stories about, like second day chag for a person coming from Chutz La'aretz. Used to be people would ask, Then they went from not asking to asking a few people, decide what they want. We're going to come to that in a minute. And then they went to just deciding on their own. Why? Because they're going to have the family, have an extra day. Okay, so, but why are you going to ask me about your Bisari Halavi mix up, but you're not going to ask about that? You make your own decision about that. If you're comfortable with it, fine. There's always the ish al smoke. There's always someone you can rely on because someone said it for sure. Yes, but you have to have part of the reason we're coming about this topic of Asel Harav is to have a derech in life. It sounds a little bit, I'm all over the place right now, but just kind of hang in there. Are you allowed to have more than one Rav? The answer is absolutely, but it can't be for the same questions, right? So let's say, for example, you want to call Rabbi A for all your kosher questions. You want to call Rabbi B for any halachot or Shabbat. Why would you choose between? Why would you? Because you happen to know that this person happens to be really very well versed in this area, and just like a doctor, he may be an orthopedist, doesn't mean he's going to know the neurological system per se, or how the brain functions. Well, if he's a neurologist, but there are different areas of expertise. Same thing's true with rabbis. I have someone I do speak to here when I come up with a question that it's just, as I say, above my pay grade, or I'll sometimes come to a conclusion and I'll say, okay, I know 100% I'm right, but I'm still going to double check because I'm not making a decision for me. It's for somebody else, and it's going to impact somebody else's life. So I'll ask and I'll discuss. So you're allowed to have more than one Rav for different things, but you're not allowed to shop. What does that mean? I'm going to send out right now. I'm going to do it right now, actually. Find it here. I came across a scholarly paper written 2 years ago. Forward it right now to the group. It's about the topic of shopping for a Rav and just shopping around for the answer you want. Okay, you'll take a look. You go into the site and then you click on whatever the title is. Forgot what it's called, but you'll see. It's the first thing that's going to come up. It's actually fascinating. I read most of the article. It's like 13 pages, but you can skip around to the section that says about shopping for a rabbi or for an answer. What does that mean? What do you mean shopping? Let's say, for example, I think I go to a store and I see a product and I don't know if it's kosher or not. So I send a picture to my rabbi and ask him, is this an acceptable hashgacha or something? But I know this is really what I need. This is exactly the product I need for my stuff. So I send a message to this rabbi. He says, it's not really an acceptable hashgacha. Don't like that answer. So I send it to another rabbi, not acceptable. Finally, I find somebody who said, yeah, sure, it's fine. I know the guy who's the mashgiach, or I know it's fine. It's all politics anyways. That kind of an answer. Oh, there's my answer. But you can't do that, right?
What if you ask the third guy, knowing that he'll give you the answer that you want, and you specifically don't ask your rabbi because you think that you're going to get the answer you don't want?
Right. That's a similar problem. Right. That's a similar problem. If it's an area that you normally would ask and you know the answer is X, asking for a friend. Yeah, that's cute. Very good. It's problematic. There's no question. I'm going to put this back up on the screen. Sorry. Okay. So that's another thing about the shopping around. I sent you the scholarly article. So I do want to bring up one more point here. Look at on the screen.
It's fine, obviously, to ask like a rabbi need instead of a rabbi.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna mention that right now. That's actually was gonna just now say that. Oh, because I'm looking in the wrong group here. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. So thank you. I actually have that written down here. There's been a huge, wonderful sea change in decision making in certain areas of halacha. And one is the concept of a what's it? Yoetzet halacha. It's fantastic. I am a big fan of Yoetzet halacha. I'm not going to get the whole topic of woman rabbi and all that. That's its own topic. But the concept of Yoetzet halacha, for those of you who are not familiar, is a woman who learns certain areas of halacha. It usually has to do with hilchot nida, and in extreme depth, and becomes very well versed and is able to answer questions about halachot of nida that normally would go into a rabbi. I think it's great because it opens so many doors for women who would just say, oh, it's probably not okay. Who knows? Let's just wait another day or whatever it might be without asking a question, or they're just a stam a question they're embarrassed to ask. They're not going to ask a guy, right? So they're going to ask the woman. And I think it's fantastic. The whole topic, the whole area of women rabbis and all that, I'm leaving that to people who, like I say, have a much higher pay grade than I am. I'll find the rabbinite to answer. I'll ask the rabbinite. Uh-huh. Now, I mentioned to you last week also that when I was trying out to become rabbi, the shul where I did become rabbi, the last talk I gave was Aseh Lecha Rav, because it was obviously the right topic to talk about when you're literally, I was the last talk before the vote. The vote was, this is on the Shabbat, Sunday night was the vote. It came down between 12 candidates. It came down to 2 candidates. Wonderful, wonderful man who ended up taking a position in Toronto, and me. And the last, Rabbi Rabahan, if you know the name. He went to Seattle or Toronto. I thought it was, yes. Where'd he go to? Long Island. Oh, they made Aliyah. Very nice. So anyways, he and I were the last 2. And even in the last, I said to some people privately before the vote, I said, I don't know if I remember the show, I'd probably be voting for him. I mean, I was a member of the show. I was allowed to vote. Yeah. A number of years younger. And anyways, so in this topic, when I spoke about it, I decided to do a little investigation. It turned out that I found something I think was kind of cool. In Tanakh, put it up here, in Tanakh, I found that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times it says Aseh Lecha. 5 times only. I'm going to read the psukim, translate them, and I'll tell you why I think that's significant, because again, it paints this picture of Aseh Lecha Ra. First one is Aseh Lecha Tevat Atzei Gofer. This is when Hashem tells Noach to build a teva, to build an ark. You should make an ark of gopher wood. Kinim ta'aseh. Oh, there's the word kinim, but it's not the same meaning here. Kinim ta'aseh. Well, it is, because kinim means compartments. So, okay, it's interesting. Kinim ta'aseh et teva v'chafarta mibayit u'michutz ba'kofer. So he explains to him how to construct the teva. So it's Aseh Lecha Tevat Atzei Gofer. Second one, Aseh Lecha, this is in Bamidbar, Aseh Lecha shtei chatzotzorot kesef. You should make for yourself 2 trumpets of silver. A miksha ta'aseh otam, and explains how to make these 2 trumpets, or these trumpets. Next, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem said to Moshe, also in Bamidbar, Aseh lecha saraf. Now what happened was the Bnei Yisrael had a magifa. There was a plague. And in the plague, Hashem says, in order to make it stop, for those of you familiar with this symbol, there's a name for it, I forgot what it is. The symbol for medical, where the staff with the, what is it? Caduceus. Okay, with like the serpent around it. This is where it comes from the story, because Hashem tells Moshe to put a staff with, and put a saraf, like a serpent around it, and put it up there, and whoever looks at it, whoever was bitten, would now be healed. Next one, number 4, Ba'etahi. This is in Yehoshua. Ba'etahi amar Hashem at Yehoshua. At that time, Hashem said to Yehoshua, Selecha charvot tzurim. Make for yourselves flint knives. V'shuv molet b'nei Yisrael sheni. And once again, give a brit milah to b'nei Yisrael. This is in Gilgal when they went during the time of the desert. They did not have brit milah. All the time they were in the desert for various reasons until they come into Israel. And Gilgal they have brit milah. And the last one is in, I think it's Yechezkel. Let me just take a look. Last one is in Yechezkel. Yechezkel, the pasuk says as follows: Ve'ata ben adam aseh lecha klei gola. And therefore, ben adam. I'm actually learning Yechezkel now, and it has dozens of times. Every time Hashem speaks to Yechezkel, he says ben adam. Now human, ben mortal. Aseh lecha klei gola. Make for yourselves things, gear, siud, for the exile. And go into exile by day before their eyes. Okay, what do these all have in common? They have something very much in common. I said the way the Torah works, the way Tanakh works, that if you find a word that's a word or phrase that's not very common, and you find it the 2 or 3 places you do, almost always, I can't say always because I haven't checked every single instance, but almost always you're going to find a connection between them. What do these all have in common? So I'm going to tell you what I said. What does the teva represent? Tabor represents helping people in distress, right? You're taking someone and you're protecting them. You're taking them in and you're making sure that they are protected from the elements outside, whatever the storm, in quotes, is in the metaphorical or the literal term. The Chatzotzot were called to arms. What was the purpose of the trumpets? Was to call people to battle, to come and do what they have to do. The Saraf was in case of people who were sick, and this was going to heal them. The Brit, Brit Milah, also means bringing to closer to the Brit of Hashem, bringing people into the covenant with God. And finally, the Klei Golah, to when a person does an Aveirah, a person does sin in the spiritual sense, their neshama goes a little bit further into galut, in quotes, into exile from Hashem, in the presence of God, and preparing oneself to do something to come back. All these are jobs, not necessarily talking about Israel right now, but all these are in the way that many people around this table were used to in Chutz La'aretz or are aware of, what's called the pastoral care rabbi. What does that mean? These things, visiting the sick, being there for people, trying to point out when things aren't, you're not doing something right to the proper way, to point out when it's being done wrong, calling people to action, getting people closer to Torah. And I felt that, and I still do, that I think that's part of the reason that it uses the term aseh lecharab, to borrow from that terminology from Tanakh, to point us to, and I've never seen this before. And I actually did a lot of research because I didn't want to sound like an idiot when someone says, "Oh, that was in this week's Torah tidbits," kind of thing, you know. I spoke. It was must have been. I think it was last year's Shalom Zachar. And I have a certain method. Whatever. I take Torah bits home on Friday, and I read it specifically after I come home from early minyan, and I make a kiddush, and I read it after kiddush. So I said something at someone's Shalom Zachar, and I come home the next day, I'm reading, I said, "Oh, you got to be kidding me. The same thing, right? They're all going to think I just read Torah tidbits for it. I came over and said it. Oh, well, it is what it is." So, tough.
We all learn from the same sources.
Is it true? Is it true? Okay, so that I don't want to get any more into the Aseh Lecharab topic right now. But why we will come to maybe in a few minutes or next week. Why is it Aseh Lecharab and also Knei Lechachaber? Why are these two different verbs? Let me just see. I have one more thing here I was going to share with you. Let's see. Yeah, I'll leave that for next time then. Okay, so let's talk about Knei Lechachaber. Now, this one obviously can be very problematic if you don't translate the word right? You know, go buy yourself a friend. It really sounds bad, right? Oh, let me actually back up a second, because I don't remember if Judy, you mentioned about that this is Yoshua ben Prachia in the Jesus story, and he's the one that says, "Aseh lecharab." You said it, right? So when you start understanding a little bit of background of whom we are speaking and who is the one giving you the information, you can understand. Sorry, it's just I can't get this out of my head anymore. The context is really, cannot use that phrase anymore. The context in which it's being said, because Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia had this experience, right? So what does it mean? Why is he saying Aseh lecharab? Because there has to be someone that you can connect to and you will rely on and you will listen to and you'll follow. The Gemara goes to the extent of when it's telling the story of Hillel and Shammai, the one who wants to be converted when he stands on one foot. So he starts teaching the Aleph Bet. One day he teaches him Aleph Bet Gimel. The next day he teaches him that it really is Taf Shin Resh, and that's the order. And he says, "Well, which is?" He says, "Well, you relied on me when I said Aleph Bet Gimel. Now you have to rely on me when I say Taf Shin Resh." What does that mean? He says, "You have to look. You can question, you can ask, but ultimately, when you come to me and want to know a derech in life, I want you to try to your best. We can work it out, but I'm going to give you the direction in life." So that's poor paraphrasing of the whole story, but it is what it is. So the reason that in a sense that Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia uses this bama, this stage to make this statement, Aseh lecharab, because he understood ultimately the danger when a person makes their own decisions. Because here's Jesus makes his own decision. He wanted to do tshuva, but he said, "Wait a minute, I heard from you yourself that I can't do tshuva." There's no way. Well, he didn't hear from himself. He knew that the idea of a person who sins and causes others to sin, which he saw himself as, can't do tshuva. Did you ask? Did you ask your Rav? If you had asked your Rav, he would have told you, of course you can do tshuva. Menashe, who was an evil king, did tshuva at the end of his life. He said, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Mishne Sanhedrin talks about the people who have, it says everyone has a place in the world to come, and then it says, here are the people who don't. And one of them was a machloket about Menashe. Menashe, again, was an evil king, and the Gemara ends up saying that, no, he has a place in the world to come because he did tshuva. And he was a horrible person. Okay. I'm going to tell you, okay, good. I'm going to tell you 1, 2, 3, I think 4 possibilities what this means. Number 1, Rashi is the classic answer, and that is books, Sfarim. Now, keep in mind, Rashi lived at the end of the 11th century, late in the 11th century, in the 1000s. There's no printing press for another 500, 450 years approximately. So it meant that you would acquire, the books became your friends. Why? It connects directly to Aseh Lecha Rav. You couldn't necessarily ask your Rav everything, right? You couldn't. Now, you had to also become educated yourself. So the friend is, in Rashi's interpretation, is something, not a person, literally means to acquire, to purchase, because you're purchasing books, you're purchasing stuff to help you. When I was talking about Aseh Lecha Rav, there's one area I forgot to mention, just popped into my head. I'm going to mention it now parenthetically, that you may be aware of. I have my own personal bias against it, but we'll talk about it for 1 second. And that's what's known as, you could only say this in Ashkenazis, Das Torah. Das Torah. What's Das Torah mean? Das Torah means that I know I'm biased in how I'm going to explain this, is you don't make your own decisions. Everything you have to do is based on what your Rav tells you. I know people who will literally call their Rav and ask them what color car they should buy, if they should add on to their house, if they should do, okay? There are people like that will not. And the problem with that is you have removed responsibility from that individual. If you've put it on somebody else, I'm not making my own decisions. And if it's a wrong decision, it's not my decision that I made a mistake. And it's my Rav's. It's his problem, not mine. And they don't say that. They don't look at that. No, there are people who, unfortunately, that's the way I can't say unfortunately, that's the way they need to live. Okay, kol hakavod. But people who want to think a little bit more for themselves and who will be able to say, I don't need my Rav's decision to decide if I'm going to get the blue car or the green car. And I'm not making this up. I mean, literally that kind of question. Okay, it's just a different approach. But usually, I went down to a very fine detail, but in general terms, it means following the ways of your teachers. Following the Das Torah means that, let's say the Agudas Yisrael has I forgot what they call the term, like top tier rabbis who meet on occasion. So they come out with a proclamation that I'm making one up. They didn't say this necessarily, that if you have an iPhone, you should burn it, destroy it, which they did do actually at some point. Not everyone said, and they give it to me. Why waste it, right? I'm an Android guy anyways. So you can take your iPhones, whatever you want with them. But so the rabbis said, then now we have to do that. You'll find it on a microcosmic level, at a school level very often. Also, that the Vada Chinuch, the Board of Education of the school, will say, you're not allowed to go to a mixed group of youth group. For example, I was on the Board of Education at 2 schools in Chicago. One was Ari Crown, which was a mixed school, and one was a grade school, and one was a high school, Hannah Sachs. And how I ended up there is a long story because it's not my hashkafa whatsoever, but whatever. And they had a rule that you could not go to Bnei Akiva, the mixed boys and girls. It's a Beis Yaakov school. Yeah, I know. Now it is. Now it's beyond that. So you could go. Now there was a girl who was found going to Bnei Akiva, and I'm on the board of Vada Chinuch, and we had to vote on what would happen with this girl. Now, I had to speak up. Now, I'm very much in favor of Bnei Akiva. But I said, I'm very much in favor of Bnei Akiva. And from my perspective, she should be going there. But I'm here at the Vada Chinuch, and the school rule that she signed on for was, you can't go. So I have to make the decision based on that. Even though it goes against every fiber of my being, that's what she signed on for. So she broke the rules. And she didn't get expelled or anything like that, whatever happened, I don't know. But I honestly don't remember. But the point being is that sometimes the Das Torah is this school. And where did they get this from? Because they got that from the upper level as well. Okay. So let me just tell you these three other possibilities for Knei L'Chachaber. We'll get a little bit more into depth next time, and then we'll talk also about have you done Chodam V'Kaf. The Rashbetz, he says he disagrees with the Rashi. He says that you have to acquire a friend, and I'm going to define that more next week. It means a real friend, someone, a confidant, someone you can talk to about life and Torah, someone who can be there, a chavuta, someone like that as well. A chavuta and a confidant are not necessarily the same person. The Meiri has two different approaches, what he says. He actually says that these two are kind of connected, that you have to first find yourself a Rav, and then when you're not in front of your Rav, you have a Chaver to whom you can ask questions to and discuss things. So he kind of, what's that? No. He says you have a Rav. That's the first statement. The second statement is, and you don't always have a Rav available. Rashi says that's why you have books, and Meiri says that's why you have a friend that you can discuss Torah stuff in case you need help. So,
like using Chaver, like, and that term used to somebody who's right.
Okay, so let me explain what that is. They actually bestowed the honor on two people when I was Rabbi Lishol. And there's a German Yekisha custom that when someone's a functionary in a shul or in a community, he's not a Rav, but he gets a title called Chaver. The Gemara refers to a Chaver many times. It just means someone who's very knowledgeable, who's a Torah scholar, but this isn't necessarily the same kind of an individual we're talking about nowadays. So the background to the Chaver was, let's say, for example, someone was, I'll give you one example. On our show, we had someone who was the Gabbai for life. I mean, he was the Gabbai, I think, before he was born. He was already from Betin, already, like Hashem already chose him. He was going to be the Gabbai for 120 years. And he's great at what he does. He's still a Gabbai, although there's Schultz calls it. And he was extremely, very active. Anything the shul needed, anything that the shul ever did, he was always there. And as a result, I bestowed upon him the title Chaver, explain what that means, and he received a document. It's written by a sofer. It doesn't have to be, but made it a little nicer. Sofer on a piece of cloth, and he has on his wall like a smicha, the title Chaver. So when he gets called up to the Torah, he's called Hechaver so-and-so. His children now Ben Hechaver so-and-so. Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is. I gave it to two people. It's something that's at the discretion of the Rav of the shul or the community, and it's usually in consultation with someone. So in this case, his father was also a member of the shul, and I went to his father about 3 years before I was going to do this, and I asked him, I think I'd really like to do this with your son. He says, not yet. And I respected him. He's a German Jew also, grew up in Germany. And he said, not yet. He's not ready yet. 3 years later, I went to talk to him. I said to him, so-and-so, I was like, I'd like to talk to you for a minute about your son. He says, yes, he's ready. It's the right time now. Didn't even have to finish the sentence. He was at different points, and I saw the growth in those past 3 previous years. So yes, it's not the Chaver we're talking about here, right?
But it sounds like he's using it that way.
Right, but he's not. Right, because there's about asking questions. Because the Chaver is not necessarily someone you can go to and ask a shaila to, or discuss something to. It's someone who has, like, say, a function in the community who's done exceedingly well at that function, and it's an honorific title. Okay, Tov. So we'll stop here. Have a wonderful day. Good rest of Hanukkah tonight and tomorrow. And get together Bezrat Hashem next week.